doing. But at a high level, we've got a number of runtimes that enable, if you're browsing the web today, you come across Flash content wherever you are. It could be for video, it could be for advertising. Experience to take place on the phone as well. So we announced Flash Player 10.1, which is an update to Flash Player 10. This version of Flash Player will be available as a public beta later this year, and will work on Mac, Windows, and Linux for the desktop. And we'll also work, we're working with these partners to enable Flash Player 10.1 to be available on a broad range of handsets. All the people here, RIM, Microsoft, are really making sure that that version of Flash Player is highly performant on these devices that have really restricted CPU, restricted memory compared to the full experience running on a laptop or a desktop. So we've been looking at things like hardware acceleration, focusing on key use cases like audio-video playback, and looking at Flash running on the web, now running on the phone, and you can see the interaction is as you'd expect. There's a number of tabbed browsers, a number of browser instances open here on the screen. And so he can sort of flick between each of those. As I mentioned before, if you're not currently looking at the Flash Player, it goes to sleep, and you can carry on using the other instances of Flash. So in this particular one, there's a music player. So again, the music player is implemented in Flash, the rest of the page is in HTML. You can double click on the Flash content to make it go full screen, and then play the music back directly inside the browser on the device. Whilst we have talked in the past about working together, we've worked internally on a version of Flash Player that shows that there is high performance, that you can get a good experience. We need Apple to work closely with us to actually take that to market and deliver Flash delivery mechanism for an application. So what we announced was the ability in a forthcoming version of Flash Professional and also a forthcoming version of Flash Builder was a way for designers and developers to package an application they built using a Flash authoring tool and deploy that as a native iPhone application. I can play it back so you can hear you. But you can see that if I record and then play back, we can directly manipulate, so I can sound like a chipmunk if I want to, I can directly manipulate the audio stream that I've recorded. And so I'm sure there'll be plenty of very business applications for this, but also karaoke on the web will be the next big thing with Air applications used to record your audio in real time. Being able to access devices was something I mentioned, and so here we have an Air application that's not correctly sized for the screen, but we'll carry on. So I can plug in a USB drive into the machine, and the Air application will recognize that that's now being plugged in. It can introspect that new drive that's become available to me, and I can see immediately what's on there. And then, due to now we can launch native processes on the machine, I can also then launch the registered file type, say for a PDF document. So I can open up a PDF document externally, or I could go ahead and open up, say for example, an Illustrator file. And again, in Air 1.5, there wasn't this sort of reach out to other applications, whereas in Air 2.0, the registration of the file type enables you to launch other apps on the user's machine and to integrate with those. Experiences for animation, for expressive web content, for video production and distribution. So Flash Professional is very much targeted at designers who want to design and be creative. What we're going to do is that Catalyst's going to read this file in, and it's going to create an XML representation of that design file. So immediately we're actually, if you like, transferring this from being a piece of artwork into being the beginnings of a Flex application. So it's just importing the file now, and what we should find is that the file we get, the representation of that in Catalyst, will be a like-for-like, high-fidelity representation of the same design we had in Illustrator. And so here we can see the application UI. It's just something that was drawn in Illustrator. And on the right-hand side here, you can see we have a layers panel, which is very familiar to anybody who's done anything in Illustrator or Photoshop. The idea was to make this interface very familiar to anyone who's used an Adobe Creative Suite tool before. So here you can see I've got a number of folders, a number of layers, and this represents quite literally the artwork that was drawn in Illustrator. Now the process in Catalyst is to go through and look for functional pieces that could be components in the application. So for example, we have some buttons over here, we have a text input box here, and we have a list and a scroll bar. So these are things I want to actually convert into working parts of the application. Now the thing we're going to build is going to be an employee directory application. We're going to be able to search for an employee, which sets us up with a template ready to go in terms of the right screen size. We've also extended Flash. If we go to File, Publish Settings, you can see that if we go to the Flash menu here, that we have a profile set up for iPhone, and we can go in here and customize some of the settings for iPhone. And you can see here the output is going to be an IPA file, which we can then take and sign using Apple's SDK and publish to the App Store. So this fits into the workflow just as would be creating a Swift or creating an Air application. So I won't go into the process of doing all that. Now, some other things we've worked on is making it more approachable for designers to use code inside of Flash Professional. One of the things we found is that with ActionScript 3, it provides a great environment for developers, but there's a higher learning curve, a steep learning curve for designers to get used to using this new version of ActionScript. So one of the things we've been working on is exposing some helpful code snippets to designers that help them do everyday tasks and help them learn about coding in Flash. So one of the things you might do, for example, here is in this code snippets panel, we're providing a whole bunch of standard pieces of code you can apply to objects in the Flash environment. So one might be, for example, in animation, applying, being able to move the item on stage with the keyboard. Something pretty common in a game environment, being able to move characters around. So I can apply that directly to that object, and you'll see that it writes for me some code that applies to the object, and also helps the designer learn about how is this constructed. So this is not about replacing coding, it's about providing some common interactions that are used a lot in Flash that designers have now access to. So again, if we run this application now, exports to Swift, and immediately I have keyboard controller being able to move this object around based on the code snippet that was applied to the object. Another area we've looked at is thinking around text. So we have some great people on InDesign, great people on Illustrator who know a lot about text. We introduced a new text layout framework on Labs last year, which really improves how you can control text in Flash. We wanted to make it very easy for a designer using Flash Professional to have real control over text when they're using this environment. So a quick example of this would be, let's go and draw out some text. So we've got a text field here. On the right-hand side, if you're used to Flash before, you can see a whole range of new properties that are available on text for justification, for formatting, for laying and managing text inside your application. I'm going to go and grab some text from a text file. And you'll see that my text is way too long for the space that I have. And so it's going to have to sort of wrap off the end of this. Now, we learned a lot about flowable text in InDesign. I want to apply the same process here. So I want to be able to go ahead and say have a multi-column view of text in Flash. I can now go ahead and draw another text input as a text field. I can go from this one and say I want to join these two together and have the text flow automatically between different text elements on the screen. And again, you can use this to automatically flow around images or create complex views with multi-column text layouts. So the first one we've actually launched already, called Distribution, enables you to add a share menu to your application. So you can share a widget or an application to Facebook, to MySpace, to a whole range of different social networking sites directly from the application. You can also offer your application up for accepting advertising, and you can also put advertising in other people's applications if you want to pay for distribution of your app.